In the quiet town of Ravenswood, known for its tree-lined streets and old houses, a group of college students decides to rent a large, decaying house drawn by the ridiculously low price and the promise of a peaceful semester away from campus. The house, a Victorian mansion abandoned for decades, seems like the perfect place for those seeking a cheap and spacious retreat. However, what they don't know is that the house holds dark secrets beyond anything they could ever imagine. From the very first day, strange things begin to happen. Doors that close on their own, footsteps echoing through empty hallways, and whispers that seem to come from the walls. The students, initially skeptical, attribute the phenomena to old pipes, the wind, or even collective imagination. But as the days go by, the events become increasingly disturbing and impossible to ignore. Emma, the most sensitive of the group, begins to have vivid nightmares in which she sees a shadowy figure standing at the foot of her bed, whispering words in an unknown language. Lucas, the skeptic of the group, finds deep scratches on his door every morning, though no one admits to doing it. Meanwhile, Sarah, the most rational one, begins to hear a voice calling her name in the middle of the night, but when she follows the sound, it always seems to come from a different room. The tension among the friends grows as each of them experiences something inexplicable. They decide to investigate the history of the house and discover that, over 100 years ago, the mansion belonged to a wealthy family who practiced dark rituals. The patriarch of the family, a man known as Elias Blackwood, was an occultist obsessed with summoning entities from another realm. According to historical records, he mysteriously vanished along with his family, and the house was sealed off by the authorities at the time. As they delve deeper into the history, the students begin to realize they are not alone. The house seems to be alive, reacting to their presence in increasingly hostile ways. Broken mirrors reflect distorted figures, furniture moves on its own, and a cold, dense fog begins to form in certain rooms, even on warm days. Emma, who has a traumatic past related to the death of her younger sister, begins to be haunted by visions of her sister, who seems to be trying to warn her about something. Lucas, who initially mocked the ghost stories, begins to feel watched all the time, as if something is always behind him, waiting for the right moment to strike. Sarah, on the other hand, discovers a diary hidden in one of the walls of the house, written by one of Elias Blackwood's daughters. The diary details the rituals performed in the house and mentions an entity called the Soul Devourer, which was summoned but never completely banished. The situation reaches its peak when one of the students, Jake, disappears without a trace. The friends organize search parties, but they find no sign of him. Days later, Jake reappears, but he is unrecognizable. His behavior is erratic, his eyes are empty, and he insists on saying that he is here and that he wants all of us. Jake begins to act violently, attacking his friends and destroying parts of the house. They lock him in the basement, but soon realize they are not just dealing with Jake, but with something much older and more evil. Emma, Lucas, and Sarah decide they need to find a way to banish the entity before it's too late. They discover that the ritual to summon the Soul Devourer was performed in the basement of the house, and that the only way to get rid of it is by performing a counter-ritual. However, to do so, they need to find the remains of Elias Blackwood, which are buried somewhere on the property. The search for the remains becomes a race against time, as the house seems to be turning against them in increasingly aggressive ways. Walls bleed, shadows move independently of any light source, and the whispers turn into deafening screams. Emma begins to lose her sanity, convinced that her sister is trying to communicate with her from beyond. Lucas, who has always been the strongest in the group, begins to feel physically weaker, as if the house is draining his life energy. When they finally find the remains of Elias Blackwood, they realize that the banishment ritual requires a sacrifice. Someone must offer themselves to seal the entity back into its original plane. Emma, already on the verge of collapse, volunteers to make the sacrifice, but Lucas and Sarah refuse to let her. As they argue, Jake, possessed by the entity, escapes from the basement and attacks them. In the final and chaotic confrontation, Sarah manages to perform the ritual, but at a terrible cost. Lucas is killed by Jake, and Emma, in an act of desperation, sacrifices herself to complete the ritual. The house crumbles around her as if it were alive and in pain. Sarah is the only survivor, but she knows the entity was not completely destroyed, only contained. Years later, Sarah tries to rebuild her life, but she can never shake the feeling that something is watching her from the shadows. She discovers that the house in Ravenswood has been rebuilt and is being rented to another group of students. As she looks at a photo of the new tenants, she sees, reflected in the mirror behind them, a shadowy figure with glowing eyes, whispering something she cannot hear, but knows is a promise of return.